understand that when you're putting 2+ million people in a stranger's home on a nightly basis, that you have a responsibility to do what you can do, to do everything that you can do to make sure that people are conducting themselves in an appropriate way.
Airbnb answers. The company says it's beefing up security measures on the home-sharing platform after a shooting at a downtown rental left 3 men dead Friday. The announcement follows calls for change to the service. Airbnb announced 3 clear measures today, all meant to make the online marketplace safer. But as Lorenda Redekop found out, some say the actions won't make much of a difference.
There's no question these changes are connected to the shooting at an Airbnb in a downtown Toronto condo.
Our thoughts are with Joshua, Jalen, Tyrone. 3 young men lost their lives on Friday night.
The 3 men killed were 19, 20, and 21. Now the company is tightening rental rules. No one under 25 across Canada will be able to rent a home in the area they're from.
Our research shows that those incidents involving unauthorized parties do significantly over-index with people under the age of 25 doing unhosted stays within the communities that they live in.
Renters who've received at least 3 positive reviews will be exempt. In the past year, shots have been fired at multiple Airbnb listings in the Toronto area, including a mansion on one of the city's wealthiest streets that neighbors say was a party home. Another change, a 24-hour hotline for neighbor complaints, starting Monday.
Things will still happen. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that things are not going to continue to happen, but what we're trying to do is mitigate.
Airbnb will also partner with a doctors group concerned about gun violence. Details are unclear, though the company is giving them $300,000.
Our gun fatality rates in Canada are about 5 times less than the U.S., so we are better than the U.S. However, we're also 5 times greater than the United Kingdom and Australia and the Netherlands. So compared to the other economically developed countries of the world, Canada has a problem.
That's a very, very, very cheap approach to buying goodwill.
Some say the changes won't do anything.
If I would be 25, I would have my friend who's 26 book the place, and then we would have a party. Like, we bring 20 people and we have a cheap party place.
The ongoing pilot will come into effect before the end of the month. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
A scare for some students and parents near Lawrence and Markham today after reports of gunshots behind Cedar Brae Collegiate Institute. It happened just after 1 p.m. The school went into lockdown and 7 others in the area went into hold and secure. Police found multiple shell casings in the parking lot as well as a car with bullet holes. No injuries have been reported and there is no suspect information at this time. There were 2 undercover police officers placed in the cells next to Kalen Schlater after he was arrested in the murder of Tess Ritchie. Today, one of those officers testified at the trial. He told the court Schlater talked to him about his sexual prowess with women and his encounter with Ritchie on the night of her death, claiming when he left her, she was still alive. Adam Carter has more and a warning. Some of the details are disturbing.
Court heard that Kalen Schlater is a pretty talkative guy. The officer testified that when they were locked up together, Schlater boasted about his ability to pick up women. He said Schlater told him he had slept with over 40 women and that girls beg him to sleep with them. The officer said Schlater talked about being a nude model and said he sometimes slept with art students who drew him. He also said Schlater told him sometimes you have to push the boundaries with women to see where it goes. Later, the officer says, Schlater asked if he had ever heard of the name Tess Ritchie. Her body was found at the bottom of an outdoor stairwell on Church Street in 2017. Investigators say Schlater's DNA was found on Ritchie's pants and bra. The Crown says she was strangled. According to the officer, Schlater told him the 2 met at a club called Cruise and Tangos. He said they were dancing and making out. Later, Schlater allegedly said, they ended up in a stairwell. Schlater told the cop he wanted to have sex with Ritchie, but Ritchie said she couldn't because she was on her period. Schlater allegedly said he was upset because he wanted to have sex with her. The officer testified that Schlater said he then left her alone at the bottom of the stairwell. The officer said Mr. Schlater said he was drunk and something could have happened, but he doesn't remember, and he doesn't think he's capable of doing it. Schlater also allegedly told the officer that detectives showed him pictures of Ritchie's body. Schlater told him he pretended to get emotional, but in reality, it didn't bother him at all. Schlater appeared to cry in court Tuesday when images of Ritchie's limp body were shown on screens in the courtroom.
The Crown hasn't yet finished with the undercover officer's examination in chief. He'll be back up in the witness box tomorrow morning. Adam Carter, CBC News, Toronto.
A man is dead after a shooting in the city's East End early this morning.
What I can tell you is we're looking for multiple suspects, at least 2 and possibly 3, who fled in a motor vehicle after the shooting. Really, that's all the information I have at this point.
Police say they got the call around 3 a.m. for a shooting at a bar near Danforth and Greenwood. Officers found a man in his 20s unconscious. They say he had multiple gunshot wounds. Paramedics rushed him to a trauma center where he later died. The victim's identity has not been released. Anyone with information is being asked to call police or Crime Stoppers if you wish to remain anonymous. The coronavirus outbreak has thrown an unexpected twist into vacation getaways for thousands of people, including more than 250 Canadians in Southeast Asia. This as 2 cruise ships remain docked under quarantine. The Canadians are on board one of them off the coast of Japan. This video of the Japanese Coast Guard, they're escorting 10 passengers off the ship who have all tested positive for the virus. None of the Canadians were part of that group, but they and all other passengers remain on board under quarantine for 14 days. The other cruise ship is also under quarantine in Hong Kong. It was turned away from Taiwan after 3 passengers from an earlier voyage were diagnosed with the virus. Chris Brown now has more details for us from Hong Kong.
It was supposed to be a 5-day cruise to Taiwan for these mostly Hong Kong passengers, but their stay on the World Dream may stretch out now 2 more weeks. On the ship's previous voyage, 3 passengers tested positive for the coronavirus, and they may have infected the crew. We saw ambulances pull alongside the ship, and 3 people were taken away. Authorities say about 24 other crew members also show potential symptoms, so they're getting checked out too. We managed to have a quick chat with passenger Rex Louie over the phone. He told us he saw some crew members coughing and taking medicine. How do you feel? I think the way Hong Kong is handling this is very good, he said. We should cooperate. And the photos he sent us showed people on board appeared to be making the best of it. This community official who's monitoring the situation says Hong Kong can't risk letting anyone off the ship.
For them, at this stage, maybe they don't have any symptom, but they might have already contracted and being contaminated.
Shortly afterwards, Hong Kong closed the port to all traffic, with 21 confirmed coronavirus cases in the territory and the infection rate growing. Hong Kong's chief executive took a decisive step today, targeting anyone who crosses the border from mainland China. The compulsory quarantine period will be 14 days, she said. What's especially concerning is that in some of the new cases, the victims had not been to China, and authorities can't tell who infected them, suggesting there could be a lot of undetected cases. We can see the trend for the outbreak is worsening. On the streets, there's evidence a lot of people think so too. We drove alongside an incredible lineup of 10,000 people, blocks long, all waiting to buy scarce face masks for protection. Chris Brown, CBC News, Hong Kong.
Bad weather has delayed the plan to airlift Canadians stranded in the epicenter of China's coronavirus outbreak. The crew of the government-chartered plane is currently on standby in neighboring Vietnam.
We have had to delay the flight by about 24 hours. This delay caused us to miss the narrow flight window the Chinese authorities are providing to countries who wish to evacuate their citizens.
211 passengers will be able to board the first evacuation flight from Wuhan. Officials say they have also secured a few dozen seats on a U.S. plane that will depart shortly after that. 373 people have so far requested assistance. Those on the flight will still need to be screened and cleared by Chinese health officials. Once the plane lands at a military base in Trenton, the evacuees will be quarantined for 2 weeks in separate rooms, but family members will be able to stay together. Federal health officials offered an update on Canada's response to the coronavirus outbreak when they appeared before a public health committee.
As of February the 4th, 2020, our lab has undertaken testing for 149 persons under investigation in Canada. And as you're aware, 4 have tested positive and 145 have tested negative.
There's also a fifth presumed case in BC that is undergoing additional testing for confirmation. Officials also say as of yesterday, 855 travelers have self-identified as having returned to Canada from Hubei province, the worst hit region in China. Of those, 3 were ordered to have further medical examinations. The public health agency said they are coordinating with other agencies to prepare for receiving the evacuees who are expected to reach Canada in the coming days. And coming our way, a triple threat, Nick: snow, ice pellets, and freezing rain.
Yeah, all of it, Dwight. And this time it's going to stick around. A lot of times we see the snowfall and then the temperatures warm up and it melts. This time the temperatures will continue to drop into the weekend. So that snowfall is going to stick around. It is also going to be sort of a prolonged snowfall event over a couple of days, but most of it coming tonight. We've got special weather statements in effect across the north shores of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. And as Dwight mentioned there, we've got a mixed bag. But generally speaking, for us in the city of Toronto and most surrounding areas of the GTA, it's going to be just a snowfall event. With that being said, the snow now just poking into southwestern Ontario at this point. It's part of a much larger system that's tapping into moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, and that's part of the reason why we're seeing some of these snowfall accumulations here. And it's also why some areas are actually going to see mixed precipitation, because some of that warm, moist air, it rides up over the colder air in the north, and as it falls down, that's when we get freezing rain or ice pellets, depending on where you are. So speaking of which, this is what it looks like heading into tomorrow morning. Again, largely speaking, along the shorelines of Lake Erie down toward the Niagara region, that's where we're likely to see the mixed precipitation. For us across the GTA, generally speaking, just a snowfall event here. Most of that, 10 to 15, coming tonight. For the city of Toronto by tomorrow morning, likely around 5-6 centimeters, closer to Hamilton by tomorrow morning, upwards to about 10 centimeters of snow. Then it's on and off, light snowfall through the day tomorrow and into Friday as well, and that's where we get some of these higher totals from. For the next 24 hours, this is how it plays out. -6 degrees tonight, feels like -12. There's that risk of mixed precipitation into tomorrow, some light snowfall, high of -2. Now, Friday, I mentioned we've got a little bit of snowfall, and then into Saturday, big drop in temperature. So lots to talk about. We'll have more on that coming up in a bit.
We will check back with you. Thank you, Nick.
You bet.
And as Nick mentioned, we can expect a rough commute tomorrow morning with this storm. Angelina King joins us live from Eastern Avenue, where the city stores its storm equipment. And Angelina, it looks like the prep is already underway.
Yes, the city's actually been tracking the storm for the last few days now. So in an effort to make sure the roads aren't too slick tomorrow, the city actually applied liquid salt to bridges, hills, and expressways back on Tuesday. That helps from the snow from sticking to the streets. Now, the city says that salters will be out tonight around midnight or as soon as it starts to snow, and then the snow plows will be out tomorrow, likely around midday. So the city says that as soon as there's 2 centimeters of snow on the ground, that's when you'll see snow plows on expressways. Once there's 5 centimeters, that's when they hit the major roadways, and then at 8 centimeters, you'll see those plows out in the residential areas. The city also says at this type of a storm, they'll usually use between 10 and 12,000 tons of salt, and they say that people are ready to go at a moment's notice. About 1,500 people. They also say that there are 200 salters and hundreds of snowplows.
A whole arsenal of equipment ready to go and ready to respond as soon as possible. This is a pretty typical storm right now. We've seen forecasts anywhere from 5 to 15 centimeters, depending on where in the city you are. But like I say, the salt trucks will be ready to go tonight.
So both commutes tomorrow in the morning and late afternoon will probably be pretty messy. Expect low visibility, especially in the morning. Plus, there's freezing rain expected throughout the day. So the city is encouraging anybody who cannot use their vehicle, not drive tomorrow, to do so. Try and stay off the roads. Work from home if you can. Take public transit or walk. And if you are on the roads tomorrow, whether you're a pedestrian, you're walking, you're cycling, you're driving, the city's asking you to please be safe. Watch out for one another, slow down, and start planning your commute now for tomorrow morning, because it'll likely take you quite a bit longer than usual. Dwight?
Good advice. Thank you, Angelina.
It is therefore ordered and adjudged that the said Donald John Trump be, and he is hereby, acquitted of the charges in said articles.
Donald Trump found not guilty of both articles of impeachment, meaning he'll stay in office as president. Coming up, what it means for Trump ahead of November's election and how Mitt Romney made history today with his vote.
I will only be one name among many, no more, no less, to future generations of Americans who look at the record of this trial. They will note merely that I was among the senators who determined that what the president did was wrong, grievously wrong.
The weather update is brought to you by Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
Three people have been killed and nearly 200 injured after a Turkish airliner skidded off the runway, plunged down a ditch, and broke up in a field. The wounded, including the two pilots, were taken to hospital, some for surgery, others in need of intensive care. Emergency crews worked to extract the injured from the splintered fuselage. Rain and heavy tailwinds were reported at the time of the landing. Last month, the same airline had another plane skid off the same runway, but no one was hurt in that incident. And at least 33 people trying to rescue victims of an avalanche in eastern Turkey were killed when they were swept beneath the snow by a second avalanche. The number of fatalities in both slides now stand at 38. 8 survivors were found in the first avalanche, but 5 lives were lost. Dozens of people worked on the rescue attempts. Snow up to 5 meters deep buried multiple vehicles, knocking some of them over. Rescue efforts are ongoing. The Republican-controlled U.S. Senate today acquitted President Donald Trump on 2 impeachment charges. It found him not guilty of abuse of power and obstructing Congress. Derek Stoffel has more.
Each senator, when his or her name is called, will stand in his or her place and vote guilty or not guilty.
This is only the 3rd time in the 244-year-long history of the United States that senators have stood up to be counted in a vote to remove a sitting president from office. The outcome, though, not at all surprising. Republicans control the Senate, and they fell in line to acquit Donald Trump. Though there was some drama today, Republican Senator Mitt Romney, a longtime Trump critic, voted to remove the president from office.
As a senator juror, I swore an oath before God to exercise impartial justice. I am profoundly religious. My faith is at the heart of who I am. I knew from the outset that being tasked with judging the president, the leader of my own party, would be the most difficult decision I have ever faced.
Mr. Romney.
Guilty.
Mr. Romney, guilty.
For most Democrats, the choice was much easier. They're still complaining that this trial was deeply unfair, as Republicans would not allow for witnesses such as the former National Security Advisor John Bolton to give testimony. This senator, though, faced a particularly difficult choice. Even though his seat in the deep red state of Alabama is seen as vulnerable, he stuck with his party and voted to oust the president.
I'm also mindful that when our founders wrote the Constitution, they envisioned a time, or at least a possibility, that our democracy would be more damaged if we failed to impeach and remove a president. Such is the moment in history that we face today.
Mr. Jones.
Guilty.
Mr. Jones. Guilty.
The Democrats were, in the end, unsuccessful in their bid to force Trump from office. But even with this vote now over, they're not giving up. A top Democrat leader vowed to expand the House investigation into the president, that it's likely that John Bolton will face a subpoena to give testimony. The impeachment process may be over, but that just signals that the fight for control of the White House has only begun. Derek Stoffel, CBC News, Toronto.
Last night's State of the Union address by the president is still creating buzz in political circles, not so much for what was in the speech, but for the theatrics and drama surrounding it.
The best is yet to come. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you very much.
In case you missed it, as the president finished talking, House Speaker and Democratic Party leader Nancy Pelosi stood behind him and ripped up her copy of the address, Pelosi calling the speech a manifesto of mistruths. There's also been a lot of talk about a moment before the speech where Trump appeared to ignore Pelosi's offer to shake hands. Democrats are also angry at the president's decision to award the Medal of Freedom to controversial conservative radio host Rush Limbaugh.
In recognition of all that you have done for our nation, you inspire, and all of the incredible work that you have done for charity, I am proud to announce tonight that you will be receiving our country's highest civilian honor. To present you with the honor, please.
Limbaugh recently revealed he has advanced lung cancer. He has been called out on a number of occasions for his racist and bigoted commentaries on African Americans, Asians, women, and people with disabilities. For elementary teachers and students across the province, tomorrow will be a strike day. Thousands of elementary teachers will be on the picket lines for their first province-wide strike. Farah Morelli now with how parents are coping.
It's lunchtime at Ogden Junior Public School. But tomorrow, things here will look a lot different. Elementary school teachers will be on the picket lines for the first province-wide strike. Talks between the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario and the government are again at a standstill.
We have absolutely no option. We could have had a deal on Friday.
The people want the parties to start acting, and we stand ready to negotiate. The mediator knows this.
Rotating strikes already started in January, and now fatigue is setting in for parents like Cindy C., a single mother who works shifts at a restaurant.
Because sometimes it's hard that if I say can I have the day off because I have to stay home to take care of my daughter, I have to find one to cover my shift. So it's kind of it's frustrating.
That fatigue exists no matter where your politics lie.
I think in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to get really tired of it. I have been supportive. I have friends that are teachers. I do support their position. But I want my child to have an education.
I hope that they can come to some sort of agreement soon, because it's definitely hard for parents to figure out.
And it's not just parents that are feeling the fatigue.
We use this a lot for carnivals.
The calls have been non-stop at the Active Kids Zone in North York. It hosts birthday parties and holiday camps. Now, it's routinely running strike day activities.
How has it been for you guys?
It's hard to rush it all together because you're trying to get all the pieces lined up. So answering the phone calls, booking the staff, pulling the activities together, it's every time we get a new announcement, we have to start it all over.
With more strikes scheduled for next week, that scramble is expected to continue. Right now, no talks are scheduled between both sides. Farah Morali, CBC News, Toronto.
Vandalized and stolen before they've even issued their first ticket. I'm Natalie Collada with the theft of speed cameras in the city. That story coming up.
Welcome to your Toronto newsroom. Good evening. I'm Mike Wise.
Notice that photo radar cameras are popping up around the city. The cameras record vehicle license plates and then send out tickets to speeders. It is hoped they'll cut down on the number of deaths on our roads, but the cameras have now become a target for thieves and vandals. Natalie Collada explains.
Before it could even take its first picture or issue the first ticket, a city pilot speed camera like this one was vandalized and 4 others were stolen.
We don't want to issue tickets, frankly. This is not about generating revenue. This is about saving lives.
Cameras like this one are part of the city's Vision Zero plan, 50 of them scattered across the city, often in areas next to schools, all in an effort to stop the alarming number of road deaths.
Speed is a factor in 1/3 of all serious injuries and fatalities that occur on city streets.
In Toronto last year, 42 pedestrians were killed. 4 have died so far this year. And along streets like this one, neighbors say drivers need to slow down.
Traffic is very rush in this area.
And so stealing and damaging the cameras, the city says, is no joke.
Removing a tool to help us, then that's you're potentially removing or getting in the way of an opportunity to save a life.
The speed cameras are meant to be moved to different areas, and so they're not secured to the ground. They are heavy, though, weighing nearly 800 pounds, and their shape and size has some in this neighborhood wondering if they were taken by mistake.
Initially, I walked by at night and I thought it was maybe something that someone curbed.
For the recycling, the guys can pick up old refrigerators, old stoves, and stuff like this. I thought it was that.
The vendor in charge of the cameras is also paying to replace them. The city says it expects to have all its speed cameras back up and running next week, with warning letters now being issued to speeders in the mail and tickets following in April. Natalie Collada, CBC News, Toronto.
Ontario's opposition leaders calling on the Ford government to pause planned reforms to public health funding in the wake of the coronavirus outbreak.
We know this event is not yet behind us, and we need to remain vigilant. I'm asking for the government to conduct a review to determine what provincial funding and resources will be needed to keep Ontarians safe in the future.
The Ontario government announced changes to public health funding in their 2019 budget, cutting their costs and requiring municipalities to pay more. They also announced plans to consolidate public health units and ambulance services. Horvath is asking the government to restore public health funding to 2019 levels to allow workers to focus on fighting the outbreak. She also wants the province to study whether the health system is adequately funded to fight a future pandemic. A spokesperson from the health minister's office says the province is prepared to respond to the coronavirus. All right, Nick has been counting down to the snow for us.
Yes, I have. I'm one of the few, well, I don't want to say few, but I'm one of the people that do like the snowfall. However, it really does wreak havoc on our traffic, and that is something you're going to have to take into account for tomorrow morning and even into tomorrow afternoon's commute. So let's break it down for you. As I mentioned earlier, we've got special weather statements in effect. The snow, though, it's a fairly long snowfall event, most of it coming tonight, but on and off snow until Friday. And then in behind it, cold front moves through, and that drops temperatures actually quite dramatically. We're going to get to that in just a second. Large system in play here. It's tapping into moisture from the Gulf of Mexico. Just starting to poke into southwestern Ontario right now. You can see the image, or rather you can see the radar image here. Now a lot of this stuff not actually falling. It's picking up some of the snow in the atmosphere, in the higher atmosphere, not quite hitting the ground just yet, but it will soon. In fact, it's just maybe about 100 kilometers from Windsor at this point. So as we move through tonight, expect the snow start to poke into the GTA around 11 p.m. tonight. A lot of the snowfall coming tonight, in particular down around the Niagara region from about St. Catharines up through Hamilton as we get into Burlington and Oakville as well. That's where we're likely to see closer to about 10 centimeters of snow. City of Toronto, though, still looking at about 5-6 centimeters by early tomorrow morning, and then it continues to accumulate as we move through the day tomorrow. On and off snow, albeit lighter, tomorrow, and then into tomorrow evening, kind of tapers off. And then for Friday, we start out with just a few flurries, but we get one last little punch of snow that could bring about, Trace, 2 centimeters. So this is what it looks like. In general, about 10 to 15 centimeters of snow for our area of concern here. Most of the freezing precipitation stays to the south. Niagara not in the clear, but for the city of Toronto and surrounding areas for the GTA, generally just a snowfall event. So for tomorrow morning, this is what you can expect to shovel. About 5-6 centimeters for the city of Toronto, more down around Hamilton, closer to about 10. Then by tomorrow afternoon and into the evening, we're upwards to about 8 to 10 centimeters of snow. Kind of carries on as light snowfall into Friday and then into Friday afternoon as well. And that's generally what we're looking at as we move through Friday afternoon. -5 degrees right now as we move through tonight with the wind chills, -9. They're dropping into the minus double digits through the overnight. Down to about -12 with the wind chill, -6 for a temperature. And then tomorrow, -2 degrees for a temperature, wind chills of about -8 to -10. Here's a look at your long-range forecast then. Thursday and Friday are sort of snowfall events. Temperatures drop Friday night, -13, -7 as a daytime high on Saturday. So that snow is going to stick around into the weekend. And it looks like Sunday, we might actually pick up a couple more centimeters of snow as another weak system kind of makes its way through. Winter has finally arrived.
And Nick Jr. finally got some skiing in, and we got video to prove it at the end of the show.
Yeah,
Nick
we're going to show you. He
okay,
loved
buddy.
it.
Thank you, sir. Thousands of people gathered on the streets of Kansas City today for a Super Bowl victory parade. Some of them had camped out overnight to reserve choice spots along the route. The Chiefs defeated the San Francisco 49ers 31-20 on Sunday. The franchise last won the championship way back in 1970. The Chiefs' current roster includes Montreal's Laurent Duvernay-Tardif. He's the first doctor to play in the Super Bowl. After the game, he said it was an honor to win for Kansas City and for his supporters back here in Canada. Now, our Raptors have a chance to set a new franchise record tonight when they host the Indiana Pacers at Scotiabank Arena. Where else would Greg Ross be tonight? He's, of course, down there. And, Greg, the Raptors on a tear right now with 11 straight wins. That has us on the same pace we were on during last year's championship run.
Certainly does, Dwight. I mean, it's been 3 weeks since the Raptors have lost a game. In fact, it was Super Bowl Sunday that they won that 11th, matching the franchise record for most consecutive wins. Tonight, with the Indiana Pacers in town, they will try to set a new franchise record with their 12th straight win this season. Now, this run has also, as you mentioned, put them on that pace that they were on last year. They're second in the Eastern Conference, right behind the Milwaukee Bucks. That's exactly where they were on that championship run last year.
The Toronto Raptors are going to win it. Their franchise mark, 11 wins in a row.
It's been more than 3 weeks since the Raptors last lost a game, an accomplishment that is somewhat surprising to even those who are around the team the most.
They won a lot of road games. It's hard to win on the road. They won a lot of games in a lot of different ways, and they won a lot of games with a lot of different guys contributing. I think in these 11 games, I think 6 different guys have been the leading scorer.
And maybe equally as impressive is the fact that this current win streak has improved their record to 36-14 through 50 games this season, which is identical to the record they had at this point last year with Kawhi Leonard.
For the win!
The man many credit with leading them to a championship.
Totally shocked. I mean, I thought this season was going to be a lot different than last season, particularly because we don't have Kawhi Leonard anymore. But yeah, I'm completely shocked that they have a record like this.
I mean, I don't think people thought that was going to happen, but Siakam's been playing really well, and the whole team has grown as a group, and they're playing really well as a team.
It may come as a surprise to fans, but not Raptors coach Nick Nurse, who says we have still yet to see his team's best.
Even though we've won 11 in a row, there was quite a few games in there. I'm not sure we played all that great, but we found a way to win, which is a good characteristic that we have.
And character is certainly something they'll need in the playoffs.
There's a different level of intensity, the game's slower, the game's more physical.
Which has many wondering if the Raptors' regular season success will translate in the postseason.
The absence of Kawhi Leonard is going to be monstrous, no question about it, but the experience all these guys got will be huge, and no other team has it.
Now, if the Raptors can pull off another victory tonight with the Indiana Pacers here in town, they'll move one game ahead of that pace from last year, Dwight. And one other quick point to let you in on. The LA Clippers, where Kawhi Leonard is currently playing, the Raptors currently have a better record than they do right now. So that's another good sign.
There's still a better chance of winning another one with us. Greg, thank you, buddy.
Being the first black person to play on Yonge Street, their reputation grew, especially from Zanzibar. They had go-go dancers in those days, you know.
Bobby Dean Blackburn blazed a trail in the Yonge Street music scene back in the 50s. Now coming up, hear his stories from the road and about the time his grandmother scared off the KKK with a shotgun. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Bobby Dean Blackburn's roots run deep, not only in Toronto's Yonge Street music scene of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, but in Canada's black history as well. The R&B musician's ancestors came to Canada through the Underground Railroad from Kentucky, settling in Owen Sound. And as part of our Black History Month coverage, Bobby Dean shares his family's history of breaking the color barrier.
Please don't leave me, baby, please don't go.
I was the first black entertainer, basically on Yonge Street, you know? So, but the rest of my band was white, of course, Bobby Dean and the Gems.
Well, if you go, you leave me.
Being the first black person to play on Yonge Street, their reputation grew, especially from Zanzibar. They had go-go dancers in those days, you know, and they're on barrels, you know. They one at this end, one at that end. Then the band would be playing.
Well, if you go, you leave me. Don't know what I'm gonna do.
Well, I was born in Toronto, but my great-grandfather came up to the Underground Railroad, right? That was back in the 1800s. And he brought my grandfather and his brother. And then my grandfather met Sarah Woods, and they got married in Owen Sound. And, and she was from England, and they were the first mixed couple, basically, in Owen Sound. I can tell you a little quick story that In those days, the Ku Klux Klan was still very prevalent there. And they come and they burned a cross on my grandmother's lawn. And she says, came up with a shotgun and said to them, I know you guys, because she's white, right? She says, I know every one of you, so you can take your hoods off and take this cross and get off my property before I shoot you, you know? And she was a real strong woman, you know? And they all just left. They all left and never bothered them again. I was brought up with a lot of prejudice when I was young, and younger and growing up. So you basically had to fight your way. You know, I was almost fired from my band because we did that show I was telling you about in Trenton by WKBW with the Hound, and they wanted my band, but they said we don't want the black guy, right? You know, so the guys in my band, Roger Farr and Bob Lenthal, said, they told me, right? And they said no, you know? But the other guys wanted to you know, get rid of me, and they could have gone to the United States and made some big money.
And you were the singer of this band?
Yeah, well, me and Bobby Lenthal were singers, but I was the lead singer, yeah.
And so what did they do? They said
learn how to play the piano, which I did, and we just went on and became one of the best bands in Toronto.
So tell me a little bit about what you and your brothers do and how your father influenced your band.
Well, me and my brothers have a band called Blackburn, and we've been together for about, I mean, the project Blackburn's been together about 10 years, and my dad is a huge influence. You know, he definitely got us started, our first gigs, and you know, I always played with him as a kid, coming up, playing different instruments.
They're fulfilling a dream that I always had, because you couldn't, back in the day, I didn't make my first album until I was 69, right? But back in the day, there was no recording for black entertainers. So how do I feel about it? Now that they were nominated for Junos and they're doing so well, I feel like my life is fulfilled through them, you know?
Thank you for sharing, Mr. Blackburn. You can find other stories highlighting the black experience in this country online. We have a special website that will be updating right through Black History Month. Just head to cbc.ca, Being Black in Canada. Some sad breaking news tonight from Hollywood. Legendary actor Kirk Douglas has died. Douglas is best known for his role in the 1960 film Spartacus. Word of his death coming from his son, actor Michael Douglas. Kirk Douglas was 103 years old. After the break, firefighters around the country are worried about a change in building codes that allows taller towers made of wood.
It creates a whole new dynamic for firefighting.
Oh no, my God!
More on the potential challenges and the business benefits coming up next.
What defines a city? It's the people. Torontonians are diverse, friendly, fanatical, and adventurous. We are the mirror to this amazing, shining city on the lake.
Our Toronto is your Toronto.
Starting this spring, Alberta will allow the construction of wooden buildings that are twice as tall as currently allowed. It's a change to building codes that's happening in other provinces too, and as Rafi Boujakanian tells us, firefighters are worried.
Wood buildings are supposed to be better for the environment, faster and easier to build. But the Alberta government's change to the allowed height of wooden construction projects from 6 stories to 12 has some firefighters raising the alarm.
It creates a whole new dynamic for firefighting.
Brad Reedman has been a firefighter for more than a decade. He's seen enough wood building fires to make him concerned about the new rules. Like this scene in Houston 6 years ago, when someone narrowly escaped a terrible fate.
Oh my God.
He says firefighters say they're particularly concerned about resources in rural areas.
So we want to make sure that the plans are in place, emergency response plans, training, adequate training.
They're also upset the province didn't tell them it intended to allow wood structures up to 12 stories tall as of this spring. They found out through social media. Reedman says BC checked in with its firefighters before moving ahead.
Want to make sure that everything's being looked at, not just rushed through for the sake of cutting red tape.
It creates more jobs, it creates opportunities for people.
Representatives from the lumber industry say they welcome what they hope will be a construction boom, and that safety concerns have been addressed through burn testing thick, multi-layered wood.
Fire has a hard time to keep eating away. It creates a layer of char, and then once that layer of char is created, the fire doesn't have that energy any longer.
The provincial government said it had no concerns about safety when it announced the changes last week.
We want to help companies get our people back to work.
A handful of tall wood buildings exists in other parts of Canada, Quebec, Ontario, and BC. And the same rule change is expected in the National Building Code later this year. But firefighters here are still asking to meet with the province. Rafi Boujakanian, CBC News, Edmonton.
Who let the dogs into the construction site? How these robot pooches are being put to use coming up. Plus, we are tracking tonight's snowstorm heading our way. Nick's back with what you need to know right after this break. A Canadian construction company is trying something a little different. It's tracking progress on projects with high-resolution photos taken by a dog. But it's not any breed you're used to seeing. Matt Demores explains.
Construction sites can be pretty complicated places. It takes a lot of staff to make sure that everything is going according to plan. But now, workers here have a new helper. And his name is Spot. Good boy. The robot dog is made by Boston Dynamics. It gained internet fame with some viral videos like this. And while this Spot has some moves too, it has some important work to do. Construction company Pomerleau rented 2 of the robot dogs. Spot will walk around taking 360-degree photos of construction sites so that staff and clients can make sure projects are on track.
We're trying to compare on the day-to-day basis the progression of the sites, the safety of the sites, and also to compare with the 3D models that we have.
This is the first time in the world that the Spot robot is used in this context, so in a construction site context.
Spot could also be sent into dangerous or confined spaces, so it's a good thing it can navigate around or over obstacles. And if it ever flips over in the field, Spot can take care of itself. The robot can work autonomously, and it's pretty easy to drive with video game-like controls. They even let me have a spin, although for safety reasons, you're usually supposed to stay a couple of meters back.
I love it. Yeah, I'm a big Star Wars fan, so I'm like, yeah, now it's happening.
You know, the future is bright for robotics and construction in our view, and this is a great first exercise.
Pomerleau will test Spot for 6 months. It'll work on Montreal construction sites, then go on tour to other cities across the country. No doggy bed required. Matt Damour, CBC News, Montreal.
And no poop and scoop. I like
No,
that.
there you go.
We talk about the snow, we complain about it, we are going to have a driving mess tomorrow when we deal with it. But we also like the snow.
Yes.
And Nick and I have been joking around because he is trying to get young Nick Jr., on the ski hill. And we haven't had enough snow for him to get his ski lesson started. Well, folks, finally, out of Centennial, we have video proof of young Nick Cernkovich. How old is he here?
He's 3 here.
He's 3 going down the hill?
Yeah, this is his first time going on the hill.
Look at that.
In fact, when I ran down the hill with him the first
time.
time.
I love the stopping.
I know.
That's how I stop too.
He's still getting that part down, but he just wants to keep going, right?
And I remember that it's French fries, and there he is with Daddy, looking cute as ever, French fries, pizza. French fries, pizza. I remember that from my ski lessons.
Exactly. And actually, that little thing that they run into there, you call it the pizza oven. So just put the pizza in the pizza oven, right?
I need this pizza oven.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah, there you
Tomorrow
go.
morning, no skiing on those roads, but we will be slipping and sliding.
Yeah, you will be slipping and sliding. Most of the snow, like I said, coming tonight, and it's going to be about 5 to 10 centimeters, depending on where you are. Heavier amounts kind of out toward the Hamilton, Burlington area, and then probably closer about 5 to 6 in the city of Toronto. But all told, we're looking at about 10 to 15 centimeters, and it will stick around into the weekend because temperatures are dropping.
Wow.
So it's not going to be that sort of messy, slushy mix, at least until the end of the weekend.
It'll be slippery for a while out there. Thank you, buddy. That's our show for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Mike Wise has your next local news tonight at 11, right after the National. See you back here tomorrow, everybody. Have a great night.